Before we start this meeting this evening, we have some very important business to do. We have the swearing in of our newest counselor. So I would like to have our city recorder, Mindy, and Randall Ammerman come to the front.
So please raise your right hand. Do solemnly affirm that I will execute the duties of city councilor of the city of College Grove, a municipal corporation, to the best of my ability, and will uphold and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States of America, the state of Oregon, and the city of Cottage Grove, and will honestly and faithfully
Congratulations. All right, I have 7 o'clock. I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councillor Irvin?
Here.
Councillor Lammerman?
Here.
Councillor Merriday?
Here.
Mayor Solsby?
Here. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Items to be added to the agenda. I see none. We have a presentation. Captain Soulard, would you like to do the honors?
Absolutely. Good evening, Mayor, Council, City staff. In September of this year, House Bill 4002 was passed, which recriminalized drug possession in the state of Oregon. As an alternative to criminal prosecution for certain offenses, the Lane County District Attorney's Office has developed a deflection program which focuses on drug treatment. Here this evening to talk more about this deflection program is Lane County District Attorney Chris Perosa.
Mayor, city council members, city manager and attorney, thank you for having me tonight. I need to clarify one thing. While the district attorney's office is a necessary partner in the creation of the Lane County deflection program, we were not the only ones that were at the table, nor was it my proposal to ultimately create that. It was actually a function of House Bill 4002, which came out of the short legislative session in February. As a proposal to the recriminalization of controlled substances. To take a step back for just a moment to kind of tell you how we got to where we are, we can all remember the passage of Ballot Measure 110. What Ballot Measure 110 effectively did in the state of Oregon was to take away the power of government to ultimately intervene in having some control in mandating treatment to certain members of our community, those who ran afoul of our criminal laws. We can talk at length about what the impact of that ultimately was following decriminalization of controlled substances in the state of Oregon. Suffice it to say that many around the state became very frustrated with the consequences of those actions. And by the time we got to about the end of the year of 2023, public sentiment was very much for some form of recriminalization, which is why the legislature took the issue up. And it was the primary issue for the short session in 2024. And once it got there, ultimately there were all kinds of proposals. The District Attorneys Association, Chiefs of Police, the League of Oregon Cities and Counties all had proposals that were before the legislature. And the legislature ultimately decided to recriminalize controlled substances and user possession or user quantity amounts at a unclassified misdemeanor level. One of the caveats that came about with that was that the legislature suggested to counties that ultimately they create a deflection program as a part of the recriminalization process. And in a companion House bill, they provided some funding for the creation of those types of programs. Lane County, myself and a bunch of our chiefs of police got together, ultimately had a conversation with regard to how we would like to see recriminalization work within Lane County. And we agreed that we would be willing to try a deflection program in the event that user amounts of controlled substances were once again recriminalized. Upon passage, we were given initially $1.9 million to start up a program. Sounds like a lot of money, and it would be in our individual budgets. It's not a lot of money to start up a brand new program within a community the size of Lane County. In the end, because some counties opted out of it, we ended up with a total of $2.1 million to start a program. That program it is designed to have a program manager who is operated out of the county. Clint Riley, for some of you may know Clint, he was the captain at the jail for a long time, the Lane County Jail. He recently retired and agreed to take on that role. He's been an amazing leader for us as we've tried to stand up this program in a very short period of time. He has one employee that works under him directly, largely to keep statistics, which the state's requiring that we keep to demonstrate the efficacy of this program. They are measuring all kinds of things out of the various programs. Understand that in the state of Oregon, we have 36 counties. 23 counties agreed to participate in the deflection program. And of those 23 counties, everybody's program looks different because the legislature essentially said each community should ultimately decide for themselves what they think this program should look like. So we got together immediately after the governor signed the bill into law April 1 of this year and began the process of trying to determine what would be right for Lane County. And this was there were a lot of groups that were at the table to this, including members of government, the police agencies, the district attorney's office, our BIPOC community, treatment community. There were people from basically every imaginable group that we could think of and invite to these things. Ultimately, what we decided to come up with was a model in which it's called the LEAD model, a law enforcement assisted, we're calling it deflection rather than diversion. Because what we're trying to do essentially with these people that are found on the streets with user amounts of drugs is to deflect them away from the criminal justice system. The vision that we've come up with, modeled after Salem, who's had a similar LEAD program in their community for the last 7 years and has seen great success in its implementation, seen to ultimately make the determination if a person is simply in possession of a user amount of controlled substances and has been involved in livability crimes where controlled substances are obviously the factors for which why they're committing these quality of life type crimes, that they can, as an alternative to arresting somebody and taking them to the jail or ultimately citing and releasing that person with a subsequent court date, they can call a peer navigator to come to the scene to ultimately make an initial contact with these individuals to set up subsequent meetings to enter the deflection program. It is a completely voluntary program by our design, where if the person meets certain criteria and are eligible, law enforcement officers can call a 24/7 number to have a peer navigator essentially come to the scene. It's not a high pressure contact between the navigator and this individual. It is simply to see whether or not they're interested in receiving treatment through the deflection program. And if they are, they have the navigator is going to ultimately set up a secondary meeting, usually a day or two after the initial contact out at the crime scene. If the person is without housing in that moment, we have been able to secure 20 beds through a company that we've contracted with to ultimately be able to provide some temporary housing for those individuals and provide them a place in which they can, at least short-term, stay to try and get their feet on the ground and ultimately make the initial contacts with the navigators who can then identify what issues that person has going on in their lives, determine where the barriers to them have been to potentially getting treatment, having transportation, housing, things of that nature, maybe mental health services, and then begin the process of working with our numerous Lane County partners in all of those fields to ultimately break those barriers down and get them the services that they need. It is in the second meeting with the navigator that ultimately the hard work begins. They will be given an initial assessment tool where the navigator, who has been trained on how to make an assessment of an individual to determine what needs that particular individual has. They'll do that tool and then begin the process of trying to find a treatment program that is appropriate for them. It's at this point too where they may identify that housing is a long-term need for this person, or that mental health services ultimately are, and they begin the process of reaching into the bag of our participating partners in the treatment and mental health community and find services to provide to them. And then that person, the navigator, ultimately acts as a case manager for that individual throughout the time that they are in the deflection program. They check in with them routinely. They go and make contact with the various treatment agencies to see how that person is performing, whether they're attending meetings or groups that they may have. And they ultimately report back to our deflection program coordinator, Clint Riley, and his staff on how that individual is doing. If the person is complying, and by complying, we really mean if that person is making a genuine effort to make it to their treatment programs, get the mental health services that they ought in this case. If you try, and one of the things that we struggled with mightily when we were talking about what does success look like in this program is that no two instances of drug addiction look the same, and the path towards sobriety doesn't look the same for any two drug addicts. So if we created very strict lines in the sand for what a person must do in order to be compliant or ultimately successful in the program, we believe that we would ultimately lose the opportunity with a lot of people who are genuinely giving their best effort to try and get sober and remain sober. We would lose those people and ultimately force them into the criminal justice system, potentially unnecessarily. If, however, somebody is not putting in a genuine effort as determined by our peer navigators, all of whom who have prior life experience in the criminal justice system and have been down this path themselves in the past, then those folks will ultimately be charged with the crimes that we were initially trying to deflect, brought into the criminal justice system, and potentially have to serve, they'll get a period of probation in which they will once again be commanded by the court to ultimately receive drug treatment at that point. If further failure, they don't comply with the conditions of probation, they don't follow through with their treatment as ordered by the court at that point, then the best we can probably to try and give them some jail time to ultimately at least start them off as they are released from custody with clean time. That's the best we're going to be able to do. And the way we've got a big flow chart in my office for how these cases will ultimately go. It's an alternative mapping system, if you will, for how this will happen. But at the end, ultimately, if we've given them multiple chances at treatment and they're just not compliant, they will not follow directions, even at the best we can offer them as clean time on their way out the door. That is largely the main structure of our program. It is going to be reliant upon law enforcement to ultimately be able to, number one, identify the people that we believe are appropriate. I have given them a very strict list of criteria. There's 6 criteria for ultimately being eligible for our program. The key components of that ultimately are that they have committed a livability crime such as criminal trespass in the 2nd degree, disorderly conduct in the 2nd degree, maybe some low-level thefts or criminal mischief in the 3rd degree if ultimately the victims are in agreement to send them down to deflection, and ultimately if a person has been the subject of theft or ultimately had their property destroyed, a victim has the right to ultimately seek restitution and have their case go to court. So we have to seek on those kind of cases the permission of the victim to ultimately do something other than a criminal offense for those folks. But if we can tether those types of crimes, which are a high volume for our law enforcement community, with those folks there's a nexus with drug addiction ultimately, and get those folks into treatment without, at least on the front end, the ability of having to drag them through the criminal justice system and have them face the risks of criminal convictions and the collateral consequences that ultimately come with those criminal convictions. We're hopeful that we can push some people to ultimately get treated. People, you know, I've been asked recently, what would be a successful percentage of people to come off of drugs? And I honestly can't tell you what something's better than nothing. We've gotten to the point where at the end of 2020, some controlled substance. And so bringing down our addiction rates is going to be pivotal for this state if we're ultimately going to see the kind of improvements I think we all want to see in our communities. And frankly, it's just the humane thing to do to ultimately try to offer them the ability to get out of that. So that's what our program in a nutshell is here to do. We had the goal of ultimately starting October 1 with our program. Unfortunately, we had some problems contracting our navigation services. It ultimately took longer than we expected. They have been hired. The group Ideal Options has been hired to provide those navigation services. They're in the process currently of training them, and the training is almost complete. And we expect, and in fact, the captain told me just a few minutes ago that he had been in discussions with Clint Riley, that they may start as early as Friday of this week, beginning to really good news. In fact, Cottage Grove may be the first community to ultimately use the deflection program. So we're really excited about that. I know Eugene Police Department was anticipating maybe starting next week. So I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have about the program or anything else.
Thank you. We're sharing this with us, and it's not often, I mean, I can't actually remember the last time a DA came down. So thank you for that. We really appreciate all your hard work on this.
I appreciate you having me.
Thank you. Councilor Merriday.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm very excited to hear that Clint's in charge. Captain Riley is a phenomenal person. I was wanting to ask you about the 1 in 5 addiction rate.
And I don't remember the month of 2023 came out with a statistic for the state of Oregon indicating that 18.1% of Oregonians were addicted to some controlled substance. Now, how they define that could ultimately include alcohol. I just want to make that clear. But you know that nearly 1 in 5 Oregonians are addicted to any controlled substance is an ominous number for us in the state.
I'm assuming those are adult members of
Yes.
the population.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, that's sobering.
Councilor Urban. Sorry.
And thank you also for being here. I have to say I have some big concerns about this program. I know they're shared by probably many. I guess one of the first ones I'm trying to order, maybe can eliminate some of the other ones. You know, where's this philosophy been tested before, or has it?
It has, yeah. So this didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, it was new to us in Lake. Salem has been running this. The Marion County District Attorney's Office has had a deflection program for 7 years. Seattle Police Department has been running a similar program up there for quite a while. There are other deflection programs that exist throughout. They'll ultimately begin to plan ours, and we've tried to figure out and talk to members from Seattle and from Marion County to ultimately see what things worked, what things haven't worked for them, so that we could hopefully right in the front end ultimately try and avoid those things that were pitfalls for their programs as they began.
And in these other models that are looked at, you know, one of the things I'm trying to gather is, like you discussed, what are the measures of success? What are the key performance indicators of such a program? One of the things I haven't been able to make peace with yet is a measure of success that says it's just being in the program. And I understand that there's, you know, a lot of literature behind. We just want to keep people in treatment. They're not getting sober. That's just perpetuating a system, you know, service providers that are in this business that are getting funding perpetually. And is it really helping the individual or their families? So I wonder, one, it seems like this is going to drive up the demand for those service providers. Are we even caring to look at drug-free employed on the other side, you know, net gain contributors to society? Is that something that's coming into consideration? Will that be part of the reporting
Right. Part of the impediment that we have, maybe I should start by saying, we have capacity here in Lane County for additional drug treatment. Our community partners who are part of the BURN, the Behavioral Health Resource Network, indicated that they have availability within their programs, specifically Emergence, who we use already within the criminal justice system all the time, has additional capacity to be able to manage. We're figuring somewhere between around 150 people per year that we can ultimately put into this program. And so, you know, that's 150 people that might have otherwise, prior to April 1 of, I guess, technically the law didn't begin, or didn't take effect until September 1 of 2024, but certainly before recriminalization occurred in April, those folks were likely not going to receive any treatment at all. The practical reality for us, at least from a law enforcement standpoint, is that a lot of these people that we are interacting with are folks that we're being called to service for, because there are calls for services being made to these police agencies, but there's nothing they can do for them when they get there. If they're in possession of controlled substances, you know, prior to September 1 of this year, and that was the only offense they had, law enforcement had to simply walk away from that person. And there was nothing that could be done for them. I understand the hesitancy with regard to whether or not this is going to be too, you know, lacking an onerous nature to it for them, or expectations, real expectations. But the goal is to simply begin to break down the barriers to treatment for these people. Our philosophy within the Lane County District Attorney's Office and the Lane County Deflection Program is ultimately that once you've entered into the deflection program, you always have a place there, even if you are ultimately kicked out of the program and prosecuted down the line. You have a person in your navigator who you can reach out to in the future to try and seek those services voluntarily. These are misdemeanors. You know, the maximum sentence we have for an unclassified misdemeanor is 6 months of sentence over the years prior to ballot measure 110. That simply jailing people has not worked to get them sober. Yeah, they start sober as they walk out the door, but they've acquired no skills to ultimately to deal with the addiction that still lies below the surface for these folks. So we're trying to provide them an ability, some tools, some skills to ultimately begin to address that drug addiction. You know, and the reality is with a unclassified misdemeanor is that we can't hold them long enough to ensure permanent sobriety with them. We just can't. So we're doing what we have with the tools that were given to us from the legislature. I can tell you, at some level, I share your skepticism on the program and whether or not we're going to have meaningful success. I've been telling everybody in the deflection program from the very beginning, we're going to be monitoring the success of this program just as much as anybody else. And statistically, that this is working, we're going to pivot. We're going to pivot and go away from it. So, or change it up in a way that might have more onerous restrictions going forward.
Thank you. There's another aspect of the decision-making point that, as I understood you to explain it, falls in the hands of the navigators themselves. Under the law, kind of principles of when you introduce that subjectivity of this person's really trying, this person doesn't, there, you know, who's monitoring that? Who are there guidelines? Like,
yes, there will be to some degree, because so ultimately to enter the program, everyone has to sign a release of information. So that release of information ultimately means that the treatment providers that this person would interact with, the navigators, and any other mental health services ultimately can and will be providing information to Clint Riley and the deflection program coordinator's office, which is then disseminated. We're treating this a little bit like for those who are familiar with the model, like a drug court model, where we will be doing weekly staffings to determine how a person is doing within the program. We've hired a paralegal within my office who is going to be kind of the point person for our office to go to those meetings, listen into how a person is doing within the program, and then ultimately, if we determine that that person is either blown us off or is not actively engaging in the deflection program, we will then file charges on that person and bring them into the criminal justice system. Again, because of the nature of the charge, the low-level nature of the charge, the goal is then to put them on a probation of some kind, ultimately to try and mandate treatment that way. So there isn't a lot of teeth in this law. It's the DAs and the League of Oregon Cities had when this bill passed was an unclassified misdemeanor, unfortunately, does not provide law enforcement a heavy stick, if you will, if you want to look at it that way, in the event that somebody just decides to blow off the opportunity that we're providing them.
Last one on the list here, I think. Another concern is how this falls down to the officer on the street, and what directive they have. And this comes to, you were referencing quality of life crimes, to where some of them are packaged together, they're happening at the same time, but there's some discretion. Do we send this off as a deflection case, really set that, hey, it's less expensive, maybe we really need to keep people out as much as possible? Then a lot of what are quality of life crimes are not going to be effectively held accountable, certainly in the eyes of the populace that they're being against. So is there a line of this is going to be criminal, or is that just laid out in statute, or if
you mean as far as
shopping cart
right out of the gates, is this going to be criminal or not?
Yeah, how is it going to be determined where this is actually a jailable offense still?
Yeah, so we have 6 criteria for law and crime that falls within the category ultimately of a deflection eligible case or not. There are also prior criminal history requirements on it. The person has to reside in Lane County. I'm blanking right now on what the other requirements ultimately are, but there is a whole list of requirements that has been disseminated to our police departments by our office of they must meet these 6 criteria to ultimately be eligible for this program. And it's then and only then. And one of them, I'll tell you, is a discretionary element that the officers can take into consideration. A security threat is hostile in their interactions with law enforcement. That's not a person that we want to put in front of a private citizen navigator. So the officer then at that point has no other choice but to arrest or ultimately cite that person in. I think from a bigger issue here is that with criminal trespass 2, for example, which is the crime that most law enforcement agencies are being called to most frequently, that's a Class C misdemeanor. The maximum penalty for that in the state of Oregon is 30 days. And people aren't getting that in courts today because we've moved in the state over the course of the last 5 to 10 years away from incarcerating as much as we once did. That's just the reality. That's been the legislative priority for quite some time. And it's been the priority of our courts of appeal as well, which is to force the laws the way they once did. So, you know, what we're trying to ultimately do is to create all avenues leading at least to treatment. We want to be able to at least provide them the ability to get into treatment programs, have there be no excuses in the future that you didn't get offered because all avenues led at one point to treatment. And then ultimately, if they choose not to take that, then we will enforce it through my office. And I've been very clear throughout my time that we will prosecute each and every one of these cases if in fact the people do not choose to take advantage of this great opportunity that we are handing them.
Counselor Lammerman.
Good evening. So is the program you're talking about county specific, or is this part of the state's deflection program?
It's a county specific program. So we were allowed, the state essentially allowed for each county or each community to come up with their own program. This was the program that we decided to adopt here in Lane County. And so, yeah, it's county-wide. We intend to offer it to every community in Lane County and across Lane County 24/7. It'll be open 24/7. Thank you.
So you mentioned that Salem has been, you said that you looked at their metrics and their success. How successful has it been?
Very
far as-
successful according, yeah, so very successful. In fact, the Lane County contingency was among many groups that went to a symposium that they held. I want to say it was in May of this last year. Their programs run out of their sheriff's department, their district attorney, their sheriff's office, Salem Police Department. Everybody who attended that from the Marion County program sang its praises and said that it's working amazingly in Marion County. So, you know, we're hoping to have the kind of success. I can tell you that the group that we hired to do our navigation system is the same group that's running, that was described, met with Josh Laird, who is the head of Ideal Options. If he walked in the door right now, you'd be surprised at him. He's a wonderful human being. He's tattooed from head to toe. we wanted specifically navigators who have life experience, the partners in the path towards becoming sober. And that's what Josh Lair and Ideal Options provided us when we ultimately agreed to contract with them. So we think we have the right group to be running this and his navigators in this. But again, we're part of a grand statewide metrics, but my office is keeping a tremendous amount of statistics on all of this. And if in fact this doesn't prove to be beneficial to Lane County, I can guarantee you we will be pivoting in the near future.
I'm glad to hear you say that you would pivot if, and not just keep throwing money at something, because I think that that's been one of the downfalls that Oregon has experienced, that we just continue to,
Couldn't agree more.
yeah. Also, how many when you say that you will give people more chances in this program, because, you know, we understand that it's a hard addiction to beat. And I'm just curious, is there a number, or does it depend on the person?
We are not setting a hard note the same, right? I mean, if you're out there continuing to commit criminal actions and specifically crimes against other people, that's very different than I failed to make a meeting. Those are two very different things. So we are leaning on our navigators to tell us largely how these people are doing within the program. We're going to know if they're rearrested or recontacted by law enforcement, because that's a report that we're keeping track of in our system. But we haven't set hard and fast numbers on that right now. Ultimately, as we get going, I think we're going to fine tune this quite a bit. You know, like I said, it's a new program. We're ultimately going to be learning as we go at some level, you know, satisfactorily completing the program as we go.
All right, one more thing.
Sure.
Talking about consequences for, I had a lot of people very concerned in this community about, I'm sure you know very well about what happened here on Main Street with all of our windows getting broken out. I think it was 11 in total. And I happened to be standing with the CEO of the chamber when she got the phone call of what the consequences of action were for that individual that perpetrated that and actually assaulted one of our police officers and took him off the job for a while for his injuries. And I could see her face fall. I mean, she worked really hard too with these business part of having these windows replaced. And, you know, that's a huge expense on small businesses and, you know, place to this day. And her face just fell. She was very disappointed, and then just probation. And I was myself very disappointed, and was wondering if you could touch on that.
Yeah, I would be happy to. That is not a function of the district attorney or anything we did. In fact, the charges that came from the Cottage Grove Police Department on that, we charge not only all of the crimes that they asked us to charge, but additional crimes for criminal mischief in the second degree. The reality here in the state of Oregon is ultimately, if you don't have a predicate set of prior convictions, you for certain felonies are going to fall within a presumptive probationary sentencing block. This individual had the only conviction on his criminal history that he had was driving under the influence of intoxicants. If you look at the felony sentencing guidelines in the state of Oregon, that puts him as an H, which is on the far low end of our felony sentencing guidelines. So, and he had no prior predicate property offenses, which criminal mischief would ultimately make him eligible for repeat property offender status. None of those convictions exist. Multiple counts of criminal mischief in the first degree, which are Class C felonies, resisting arrest and assault on a public safety officer. Resisting arrest is a Class A misdemeanor, assault on a public safety officer is a Class C felony as well, and it's a person crime. Unfortunately, because of his having a lack of criminal history, all of those charges fell within presumptive probationary ranges. And so there was nothing the court could have done other than what the court did in that case based on the sentencing structure that's been established by the legislature in the state of Oregon.
So this is Counselor Ervin.
So restitution is off the table in this case?
No, restitution is going to be ordered on all of that. And in fact, I looked at it, it was a condition of the probation that this individual's on. But be mindful, most of the people who are convicted of criminal behavior in the state of Oregon or anywhere in the United States of America are folks that do not have the resources to ultimately pay the restitution back. And so unfortunately, many of our victims of crimes never see $1 of restitution as a result of the criminal convictions and the ordered restitution that accompanies them. So he's ordered to do it. If he doesn't pay the restitution within the probationary period, all that happens, we can't sanction him for it, the Court of Appeals, so we can't even revoke his probation for that. What happens is it gets referred to the Department of Revenue. And then if he receives a tax return at any point or inherits money, they will take that money and distribute it to the victims later on down the road. but we can't sanction people anymore for failing to pay restitution.
I guess I'll just say this is a broken system. People feel hopeless and they're going to get desperate
I agree.
because
I
it's a
agree.
dangerous position to be in this area, in this state with this apparatus.
Yeah, and I would just simply say, Councilman, that my office, the District Attorneys Association, has been lobbying hard to get these laws changed. And unfortunately, we just haven't seen any success in Salem over the last 5 or 6 years.
Let us know how we can be of help.
Will do.
Mr. Prosa, again, we really appreciate
Thank you for
and
having me.
for being here tonight.
Thank
Thank you. Appearance of interested citizens. This is a time for citizen comment. The council will first take comments addressing items not listed on the agenda for a maximum of 30 minutes. The council will then take comments addressing action items on the agenda for a maximum of 30 minutes. Individual speakers must be recognized by the presiding officer, provide their name, identify whether they are a city resident, and if so, their ward. Please limit comments to 3 minutes or less with the council approval. Comments regarding a hearing. The council will not make any decisions based on public comment. However, staff and council may choose to ask questions or comment following the conclusion of citizen comments. Cameron Wrighton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. I'm Cameron Wrighton, Cottage Grove resident, Ward 3. I will just say that my comments tonight represent only my own personal opinions as a Cottage Grove taxpayer, business owner, property owner, and not those of any other entity. Madam Mayor, thank you for addressing with DA Perosa the issue of Mr. Schott's rather lenient sentence. And while his comments were certainly disheartening, they were very illuminating. Because to say I was utterly appalled when I got the news that Mr. Schott had been sentenced to 3 years supervised probation, 45 days in jail with credit for time served. And this incident occurred on the early morning of August 21st, excuse me, and he was sentenced on October 4th, so we can all do that math. It was extreme circumstances, criminal history or not, should an individual who assaults a police officer to the point where that officer had to be off duty for a period of time to recover after that encounter, after this individual does thousands upon thousands of dollars worth of damage to Cottage Grove's historic buildings owned by business owners who can ill afford a loss like that, that individual needs to be incarcerated someplace. And while I remain eternally humbled and grateful for the generous support of the community who really rallied around the affected business owners to help go a long way to make us whole, this sentence was a slap in the face. It was a total slap in the face. So I would urge you folks at higher levels of government to use this case to illustrate the significant flaws and failures of our criminal justice system here in Oregon, because as one counselor has already pointed out, it is broken. And Mr. Perosa's comments really illustrate that as well, because as he pointed out and was explained to me in great detail by the district attorney's office, the likelihood that we will ever see any of us, and by the way, just to clarify, I own 2 properties that were damaged by this individual. The likelihood that we will ever see a dime in restitution is very minimal. Thank you.
Thank you. Brett Rosers.
My name's Brett Rogers. I'm just staying at the dog park that's called Dusk Dawn. But it's 7 to 7, and a month from now it'll be dark at 5. And at the peak of winter, it'll be dark at 4. And a month from now, it rains for 3 to 5 days in a row, and I have to put up a tent in the rain and darkness and take it down a tent every morning, and literally dragging your stuff around town, blankets, not knowing where to get warm, which will push our bodies to the breaking point. We are all going to get sick. Living outside was the only place to go that I get out of the rain is under a gazebo or the nearest park to get out of the rain. And a lot of homeless are stuck with their gear and unable to get food and medicine and have no place to go. I personally don't look forward to being sick and stuck at Corner Park, sick every day, stuck there waiting till 7 to go back with all my gear on my back and sleep in wet blankets. The health situation that can end up in death. I pray it's not me. The only fact is that no parent should bury their kid. I have a young mom, she's only 17 years older than me, and she's a good woman and took good care of me and taught me solid values. I've been through 2 spinal surgeries, and doctors say it's a miracle that I'm able to walk. Many of us are older and can't push ourselves any farther. My elbow and knee are going out from the struggle. The last 2 weeks, my tent and blankets at the dog park, and Friday I lost all my blankets and tarps that kept me warm and dry. I will not stay in a 12th Street Dusty Dawn camp if I'm unable to stay warm and dry. I live in Cottage Grove for 19 years, and I'm part of this community. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Don Berglund?
Good evening. I just wanted to talk about the homeless situation here in Cottage Grove. Okay. Thank you for gathering here today to discuss an issue that weighs heavily on the hearts of many in our community: the unjust treatment of the homeless population in Cottage Grove, Oregon. It is disheartening to witness a solution that does not treat our most vulnerable citizens with the dignity and open roof kennels for just 12 hours a night from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. This is not a shelter. It is a temporary holding area that strips away the fundamental rights of individuals who are already facing immense challenges. By relegating them to such environments, we are effectively dehumanizing those who desperately seek refuge. Imagine privacy. This approach does little to address the underlying issues of homelessness and instead fosters an environment of neglect and marginalization. Moreover, every day, having only 10 minutes to evacuate before law enforcement is not merely an inconvenience, it is a systematic failure to provide a safe, stable living situation. When the weather turns bleak, as it often does in our region, the challenges multiply. Setting up tents in the pouring rain or biting cold is a heartbreaking reality for many who find themselves exposed to the whims of Mother Nature. This practice is not only impractical, but also cruel, compromising the health, safety, and well-being of individuals who are already living on the brink. So what is the solution? We need to advocate for a more compassionate and comprehensive approach to homelessness in Cottage Grove. We must work together to create sustainable housing solutions that offer the shelter, stability, and dignity every person deserves, instead of temporary measures that perpetuate suffering. We should consider constructing dedicated shelters with privacy, access to services, and community support can make a tremendous difference in the lives of those experiencing homelessness. Furthermore, we should engage local organizations, nonprofits, and government entities to collaborate on comprehensive outreach programs that address not only the need for shelter, but also mental health support, addiction services, and job training. By investing in our neighbors, we can help break the cycle of homelessness rather than simply managing its symptoms. In closing, let us remember that homelessness is not merely a statistic. It represents real lives filled with stories, struggles, and potential. We are called to create a community where everyone has a place to call home. Together, we can uphold the dignity of every individual in Cottage Grove. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Christensen?
Bill Christensen, 1337 Elm Avenue, Cottage Grove, Oregon. I wanted to address something that others it may seem to be a minor thing, but there seems to be a back and forth between the mayoral candidates that are running for mayor on Facebook and some of the other social websites. I just want to remind everybody that the people of Cottage Grove want leaders that they can respect. And when you engage in the back and forth and he said, she said, that's not what the people of Cottage Grove want. And they care more about people that care about them and show respect for one another than they do about who gets the credit for this issue or that idea or this idea or whatever. I just wanted to remind you to take the high road. Give honor where honor is due. If somebody has an idea, give them honor, give them credit. Don't try to use it for your advantage. This is going to be short, but I just want to finish with this. Success, this is my own word, success comes with common sense ideas and solutions to better the a threat to your achieving a position. To me, that is true leadership. So I just want to leave you with that. I'd like it to stop, and I'd like it to stop today and focus on your own campaign and not on he said, she said. Thank you.
Thank you. David Dunn?
Hello, David Dunn. I reside in Ward 2. I just wanted to give a short boots on the ground report of the Dusk Till Dawn camp. Although things have been pretty quiet the first few weeks, my family and I have been dealing with much of the same problems as before, just on a much smaller scale now. So I think the only thing keeping things stable there right now is the security that is there. And I just want to let you guys know it's not as stable as it seems. So just let you know, that's my report. Thanks.
Thank you. Kenneth Ide.
Good evening. My name is Kenneth Ide. I reside in Ward 3. I'm so disappointed in you, Cottage Grove, especially you, Mayor, because I gave you an opportunity to not be so discriminative against part of your community. Telling part of your community to leave town because they can't afford housing, or because they have a mental disorder, or maybe a drug addiction, is not an answer. I don't understand. I don't understand how you guys can really look at yourselves and how do you sleep at night? Probably not cold and wet like they're about to. I mean, I really want you to think about that. This is disgusting how you're treating people. And you're teaching your children this? And the DEA already said he's trespassing too. How do you gonna prosecute somebody like me? You're lucky I don't just have you guys keep collecting all my stuff and store it while you send me to Eugene. This is rude the way you're treating people. I'm done.
Thank you. Dale Gangle.
Good evening, Dale Gangle, Ward 1. I just find it kind of appalling that we got a counselor on this ward or in this chamber here tonight that's calling the city of Cottage Grove socialist. He says he's a socialist. I mean, that's a violation of his oath of office. It's a violation of his pledge of allegiance to that flag. This is a republic. The United States of America is a republic, not socialism, not communism. It's a republic. That's a violation of your oath of office. And most people think that's borderline on treason. You take that, you owe the city a big apology, and I'm expecting it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any comment?
Yes, I'll be happy to respond to Mr. Gangle. I think if you listen to the entire program on K&D, when I was asked by speakers asked me directly, are you a socialist? I said, I think yes, that many people in the United States of America believe in socialism. The problem is the word has been misconstrued, misappropriated, misdefined. Do you support your police department? Do you support your fire department? Do you support Social Security? Do you support anything where the public pays in and receives a benefit? The same speaker spoke in this chamber a number of weeks ago, saying that they had difficulty in locating a family member here because corporations have bought up many rental properties and are making it a for-profit business, eliminating housing for people that can't afford their prices. There is a role for public to put in the input of financial resources and receive a benefit. If you rely strictly on free enterprise, they're interested primarily in their stockholders, their profits, and their business model. If they can make a dime off you, they will. There is people that don't have access to services, don't have access to healthcare, don't have access to housing. And for a number of reasons, what do you do with people like that? They can't afford it. That's where you have the social safety net to care for those. And that is democratic socialism. It's not like you just think that socialist or some commies or something. It's not that. It's where you pay in. Socialism is where you pay in to a common pool and receive a benefit. And that's been a model for our whole country, from starting with fire in Boston many, many years, triggered and colored so that you hear the word socialism and you think that it's something wrong.
I will respond to Mr. Ide, and by saying that the camps were in response to some laws that were passed, and I do not believe that it has ever well, it's never happened before where cities have been, municipalities have been expected to is paid for by the taxpayer. And cities are not socially, cannot, they don't have, we're not equipped to handle that. And we cannot financially sustain that. And it's been tried and it was an absolute failure, unfortunately. And sadly, we're doing what we have to do right now is we did try it the other way. And I want to clarify, I didn't ask anyone to leave. And we're doing the best we can with what we're dealt with. And unfortunately, the city of Cottage Grove cannot, in my opinion, afford that. And we came into with a budget that we've had to cut jobs and we actually are down employees. So it's not something cities have traditionally done in the past. Did you ask? Counselor Lammerman.
Thank you, Mayor. Real quick, members of the unhoused that are here. I met most of all of you except for the gnome. He didn't like me that day. But Brett and the rest of you who are here, I know for a fact you guys were fairly clean, kept it organized. But a big part of the issue that the town had was the amount of crime that was going on, overdoses at either one of the camps because there's a lot going on. And just the disorder of all of it. It was meant to be a good thing and trying to give a place for you guys to keep everything. But there's a lot of people who took advantage of it. I don't think there was enough people there for the amount of bicycles. But I think if it would have stayed a little bit more organized and a little bit more clean, people probably wouldn't have been so furious over it. And like I said, I know you guys were all clean. Brett, you're a good guy. You had a nice garden going over there. But you're a very small part of the big picture that happened. And unfortunately, we didn't want to keep seeing that. Hopefully, we can figure something out that'll benefit everyone, not just a few. That's all I gotta say. Thank you.
Counselor Urban.
So just add a little bit to that. I do see that this is what we have right now was a cleaning of the slate of what was the residents around. And so we had to say no. I can say what I would be in support of. I think I've been fairly clear about it all along, which is if there's a way that residents can be working their way up and out of that situation through vocational training and work, where they're adding back to the community that's supporting them in a limited capacity. We don't have endless resource as a small community. So we have to first arrive at what is our reasonable capacity in terms of numbers of people that we can help. Then I think you'll find that the community will rally around. And see from our other presentation, we don't have much of a tolerance for free riding and being taken advantage of. We've been burned out on that. We're struggling ourselves. You guys like to say how close we are to homelessness ourselves. It's true. And we're struggling to keep it together. And any number of things could go wrong. And so there isn't a high and mighty standpoint. It's we all have to work hard and support. And we can't be getting taken advantage of or looking over our backs or having to shoot, we forgot to lock something up and now it's gone kind of thing. We have to live as a community. So the expectation goes both ways. So under that circumstance, to that direction, that's where I stand on it. I know there are providers I have toward Everyone Village. They have a model that I can support and get behind and would like to be to see more on that. That is something where it's, you know, up and out. This idea of that the community around you just endlessly pays your way. Nope, not going to fly. And if it even tastes or feels like that or that hint, then it's not going to go anywhere. So there has to be this collaborative, here's what I can do. Yeah, I want to help build the next shelters for the next people. I want to be involved in the next thing. That's what I'm going to be looking for, and I'll fully support that. I do want to touch on, it's out of the norm, but my key understanding of the difference between a democratic socialism and a constitutional republic is the analogy of, in a democracy mob rule, everyone can vote to take your food in your house. in a constitutional republic, you have fundamental inalienable rights bestowed by the creator that are non-negotiables and are can be defended to the death, and it should be. And that's what's made this country great. And so I get my ears perk up when I hear things about pure democracy, because it doesn't honor fundamental rights that each of us have: life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So maybe that's going to be a future discussion. We can go into more detail, but these things do matter. They matter about how we structure our society. They matter about how we view each other and what we can get from one another versus what we respect and honor about them as a country. So it does matter. And I guess that's why I felt like saying something right now. Thanks.
Thank you. I want to say one more thing that I've said before is I believe this community is a compassionate community, and I don't believe anyone wants to punish anyone for being homeless. It is behavior that we want accountability for. And so there's a big difference in that. Right. Public hearings. This evening, we have a public hearing on a proposed ordinance amending Cottage Grove Comprehensive Plan to add Cottage Grove pedestrian and bicycle plan to transportation element. The City Council will make a final decision on the ordinance based on a complete record, including the Planning Commission recommendation and testimony received at tonight's public hearing. These proceedings are being recorded. This hearing will be held in accordance with the land use procedures for legislative procedure. At the beginning of the public hearing tonight, staff will identify the applicable substantive criteria for the city's comprehensive plan and/or state of Oregon statewide planning goals. For anyone wishing to speak, we ask that you use the sign-up sheet that has been provided. Interested persons will be recognized in the order in which their names appear on the speaker's list. When called upon to speak, you must be recognized by the chair, and you must state your name and address for the public record. We ask that each speaker limit themselves to no more than 3 minutes. Please remember that all presentations will be timed. You will be informed when your allotted time has expired. I will ask speakers if you do not finish with your presentation, be sure to provide a copy of your statement to the staff. Written testimony may also be offered and will be considered and part of the record. In order to minimize repetitive testimony, organizations are encouraged to have only one person speak for the group, with other members of the organization standing to show their support. Each person may testify only once unless called back to the podium at the request of a council member to respond to a question. Before we begin, does any counselor wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest in this matter? All right. I will now open the public hearing at 8:12. This public hearing will be held for the purpose of taking comments on amending the Cottage Grove Comprehensive Plan to add the Cottage Grove pedestrian and bicycle plan, the transportation element. We'll now have the staff report by Mr. Mongan.
Good evening, Mayor, and thank you, Council. As the Mayor just stated, the purpose of this public hearing is to receive comments on this proposed amendment to the Cottage Grove Comprehensive Plan transportation element, that is to add the Cottage Grove pedestrian and bicycle plan to that section as an appendix to the 2015 transportation system plan that represents our qualifying component of the transportation section under state law. The Planning Commission did hold a public hearing on the attached ordinance and the draft plan on September 18th of 2024 and recommended approval of the draft ordinance and plan to council. The Cottage Grove pedestrian bicycle plan is this product that you have before you is follows about 20 or 22 months worth of work between city staff, consultants from the Oregon Department of Transportation, and HDR. In addition to that, members of the community, both by way of public comment opportunities that were held at public open houses held at the Cottage Grove Armory, but also via comments received from community stakeholders that participated in a technical advisory committee to the report. This project was funded via a transportation growth management grant for the amount of $200,000 for the city's efforts to make this, to really round out our pedestrian bicycle facilities in our 2015 transportation system plan. The relevant statewide planning goals for this legislative action would be Goal 1, citizen involvement, Goal 2, land use planning. Um, Goal 8, recreational needs. Goal 11, public facilities and services. And of course, Goal 12, transportation. Staff has reviewed and made findings for each of those goals, representing the compliance of the report itself with both statute and regulation or rules. Let's see, to date, only one public comment has been received, and it was received at the September 18th Planning Commission meeting. It was presented by Public Works Director, Mr. Stewart. He recommended a report, an important segment of the potential pedestrian bicycle facility had been omitted from two or more of the exhibits. That particular section was the proposed pedestrian bicycle path system along the east bank of the Coast Fork Willamette River as it moves north from Cleveland Avenue up behind the middle school. And then from there, it will go parallel to the railroad tracks up to on its north terminus just at Bohemia Park. That is an example of how this document is still, comments are still welcome. And it's an important contribution that Mr. Stewart made to ensure that this document has its full effect, which is to prepare the city to have a good actionable plan on how we want to redundant facilities in our city for the next 20 years. The plan itself identifies gaps in the system and identifies potential routes for greenway systems and pedestrian bicycle path systems, funding mechanisms for how the city could accomplish it. And lastly, it also makes recommendations for the development code on changes that will help to create clear and objective standards for community expect when a new subdivision or a new street is proposed via development. So at this time, staff recommends accepting public comment on this draft ordinance and plan.
Thank you. Does council have any questions of staff? Councilor Urban?
Yeah, thank you for all the work on this. It's more to process, or do we understand this is like a living document that as things come up, amendments can be made and that will get folded in? Or is that the same kind of public comment, planning commission kind of process?
Just as staff is bringing this proposed comprehensive plan amendment before you this evening, if something did come up along the way, the legislative type 4 process through the development code kind of creates this process. So it wouldn't necessarily be somebody could walk in off the street and say, hey, I want to put a stop sign here. That's down here and this plan's way up here. But if there was some circumstance that did require, let's say, a recommended action item, direction is sought, then yes, it could go through this legislative process of amending that particular section of the code. This is very similar to other opportunities that, and of course beyond, but when we adopt the 2018 housing needs analysis, right, then we come in with additional information with the Affordable Housing Action Plan and other things, or change direction of a document.
I was looking, I saw one comment on e-bike, just addressing that. And I thought that's probably something that's going to become, it was part of the public comment section that, hey, we might need to do something about, these higher speed, interruptions. So it got me thinking about maybe talking about how we do signage or something like that, but probably not for tonight, but just thinking about how that might get brought up down the road and wrapped in.
Mayor, Councilor Irvin, I think this document's a little bit higher level than that. If we're just picking on e-bikes, I think they're cool. I've never ridden one, but my dad loves his. But that would be something more, akin to, whether or not we permit bikes to be ridden on sidewalks. I know council of the city's charter or code, I should say. And so that might be something more just picking on that one. But I think if it were more of, we wanted to, don't hold, I'm not thinking about this, get rid of cars. And so we were going to convert all right-of-ways that have vehicle travel lanes into, some other surface that was for whatever the other mode is. This would then need to be updated or amended to reflect, okay, we don't need 11-foot wide vehicle lanes. Maybe we only need 6. And so that would be kind of that overarching sort of how we grow document.
Councilor Merida?
So I'm not sure who to direct the question to. It's kind of procedural because we'll also go back to vote on this plan later in the meeting. But I did want to give some input to the plan. I don't know if it's better at this doing.
Mayor, Council Mayor Day. At this point, on the public hearing, I believe it's more geared towards our community members making their contribution. I think that once it's brought back to you and the public hearing is closed, then that would, when the
Would be more
ordinance itself is
appropriate.
considered, it would be more appropriate.
Excellent. Thank you.
Unless I'm wrong.
All right. The only thing I would add is that if you have questions about the adoption process or the plan, sorry, I was at the game on Saturday. I'm quiet tonight. If you have questions about it, that would be later. If you actually have testimony or something that you want to have considered as part of this is the plan before us. Do we want to change it? Do we want to consider something? And you want it part of the record that you want to contribute. And so I just
It would
wanted
be
to
more of an addition or an emphasis.
Uh,
Well, it's not really a change, but certainly something to be put on the record. I want to refer to page 22 of the document, and this shows gaps in our network. And there's kind of a large gap on River Road between about Park. And I would like to see that as a priority to fill that gap, because this is a very popular walking area for our citizens. They walk River Road nonstop all day with their dogs, walking off. Many people do a route. They go over the Chambers Bridge and up to the Swing Bridge. And then when you get to that point, the sidewalks disappears on one side and there's difficulty in crossing the bridge. Luminary, this is Darrell Burleson, and he lived up towards Saginaw on Highway 99. And as a youth, he saw a picture of a runner on this early copy of Sports Illustrated and had the dream that maybe one day he could be on Sports Illustrated. So he would run from his home down River Road and up to the high school, and became a standout athlete at Cottage Grove High. He's enshrined in the Cottage Grove Hall of Fame. And then he went to the University of Oregon and ran under Bill Bowerman and set many records. He was the first person to break the 4-minute mile in Hayward Field. And then he went to the Olympics. And he was in the Olympics in 1960 and 1964. And this was a Cottage Grove kid that made good. And Coach Bud Taylor had the dream of some way commemorating him as an inspiration to youth, and wanted to in some way hold his accomplishments up to Cottage Grove youth and say, yes, you can succeed. So ultimately, I would like to see that we complete those gaps, that so any future aspirant, be it a Cottage Grove youth or anyone that comes to Eugene for the track season, might want to come down to Cottage Grove and run on the Darrell Burleson Trail to serve as a place, a destination, and add to our tourist palette of attractions. So I would just somehow like that to be on the record, that would be a priority I would like to introduce. Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Okay. We will now take public testimony from everyone interested in this proposal. For all persons testifying, please remember to state your name and address for the record. We have one person signed up, Donald Norden.
Evening, I'm Donald Norden. I live at 239 Adams Avenue, Ward 3. I also have property in Ward 1. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, staff. First of all, I want to applaud this voluminous Cottage Grove bike and ped plan. It is so detailed, so many things. And then applaud also Mr. Stewart finding that missing gap there along the railroad that meets from Lincoln High to the Bohemian Park. It was indicated once as a near-term goal, and then on another map as a moderate-term goal, but that's detailing. Right now, I just want to applaud this and of course recommend its adoption. 118, the issue of the Cottage Grove Mobility, Transportation Mobility Center. It was mentioned in that document that this was something that was considered and kind of dropped away because of COVID at the time, and it didn't make the hit. And then again on page 149, section 4.1, and the first one is Appendix A in section 2.1.5. It references again, and also back to our Transportation Development Plan of 2021, the intent of this community to have a mobility center in the area of 12th Street or at the Trailhead Park. So this was the intention of this community for several years, and it's kind of dropped away, and now it's in our plan. And in the ODOT presentation they had last November, it showed it as a Tier 3 aspiration. And I feel like it should be moved at least to a Tier 2 aspiration because the city has required. And it's time now to have the council request the staff to put this, apply for the next possible grant to ODOT or whatever agency is offering grants, so that we can get that feasibility study funded and progress on the program. Starting now, it'll be, 5 years from now to get, the grant, the study then going on. So I think we should start at least asking for the fund or the grant funds again. Thank you.
Does council have any questions of Mr. Norden? Okay, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this matter? Okay, see none. Okay. Do councilors have any further questions? No? I will now close the public hearing at 8:29 p.m. Council will deliberate and make a decision on this ordinance as agenda item 8B. Consent agenda.
Move that the council approve the consent agenda.
I second.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Unanimous. 8A, a resolution amending the fee schedule adopted by ordinance number 2361. Mr. Monken.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council. The city council has established a comprehensive fee schedule, which was created to include a listing of the fees for various items or services provided by the city. The attached draft resolution amends all sections related to building permit fees in the comprehensive amendment, amended or increased in 2016 with resolution number 1900 back on March 28th of 2016. At this time, it is appropriate to consider the proposed increases as a measure to ensure that the fees provided. The proposed increases were derived by completing a regional market analysis, specifically looking at cities from Albany down to Douglas County. The city of Roseburg actually does all their building permit services through Douglas County, so it was kind of a one-stop shop. But other places looked at were the city of Eugene, Springfield, Coburg, and Veneta as well, to just see where things were. Additionally, the state of Oregon through the Building Codes Division reviewed the proposed amended fees, ensuring compliance with the permit types that were presented, but also ensuring that we weren't off the mark, if you will. That was more of a, as I understand it, a courtesy review done by the state to ensure that on a proposed fee. Prior to bringing the proposed changes to the city's building permit fees, and as required by state law, the city provided a 45-day notice of the proposed changes, which is shown in the attached letter, to allow other agencies, builders, developers to comment. Additionally, staff sent the proposed changes to the Western Oregon Builders Association for comment. As of October 9th, 2024, no comments had been received, either verbal or in writing. It is recommended by staff that the city council consider and adopt the attached draft resolution with the proposed changes to the comprehensive fee schedule regarding building permit fees.
Mindy, do we have a resolution number?
Resolution number 2154.
Councilor Urban.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the council adopt resolution 2154, amending the fee schedule, which was adopted by ordinance number 2361.
I second.
We have a motion with a second. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Discussion.
Oh, discussion. Sorry. Councilor Lammerman.
Repeat my comments from Friday, that I was pleased to see some of the fees had gone down and that there was focus put on to these fees to make sure that we were competitive in the area, and that it wasn't going to be a wet blanket on development, and that we are open for business as a city and ready to have builders come.
We all appreciate all your hard work, staff. Thank you. All right. Any others? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Meredith,
Aye.
Counselor Urban,
Aye.
Counselor Lammerman,
Aye.
Mayor Sosby.
Aye. Unanimous. All right. First vote for ordinance amending the Cottage Grove Comprehensive Plan to add the Cottage Grove pedestrian and bicycle plan to the transportation element. Mr. Monken.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just apologize here. I'm pulling up my notes. As you're all aware, this document was very lengthy, so I didn't want to reprint a 270-page report, so I do apologize.
Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, while Mr. Morgan's gathering his report, I'd like to point out that in the audience today, we have Mr. Bush, Jason Bush. He's our billing official, and I'd like to also point out Melanie Clemmer. She is our resident and more.
Thank you for being here.
Okay, well, thank you for your patience, and thank you, Mr. Stewart, for doing that. It's not loading, but I think I can win this. So the council has held a public hearing on the proposed ordinance to amend the comprehensive plan to add the Cottage Grove and pedestrian bicycle plan to the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. During that time, comment was received by Mr. Norden. As he pointed out, the page numbers, it does exist in the report. And so I do believe it's accounted for. I did want to give a little bit of background information on why its prominence is maybe, not to his appreciation. But I would just say that when this was reviewed by the Technical Advisory Committee in support, with the support of the consultants at HDR and ODOT, that there became a concern. I think this would be something for the council to provide staff direction, staff's part, and a presentation. But really, what the Technical Advisory Committee arrived at was just that we don't know exactly what the transportation hub's focus would be. A lot of times when you see these in other locations around the country, world, really, they really are kind of a useful tool. They'll be focused on things like tourism or workforce or, some other community amenity. And so with Cottage Grove, we weren't able to put our finger on what it would serve. And so then that kind of led the conversation down of where it should be. Should it be, as Mr. Norden pointed out over there behind the Dairy Mart area or Trailhead Park area. Certainly from a tourist end of things, that would provide proximity to Bohemia Park, the Row River Trail, our historic downtown. But it may not be the best fit for workforce related or school related or other factors like that. So there's just a little bit of extra background work that we felt was outside of the scope of drilling down on what the intended purpose would be for that transportation hub. So it is in the plan. It is therefore teed up for that moment when the council gives direction to staff to identify a funding opportunity to move forward with that report. Regarding Councilor Mary Day's pointing out of the pedestrian or walking trail system there along that segment of South River Road, it does show up on the plan as a gap. It is identified as a medium term action item, if you will, in things. But I would just ask that there had to be a categorization, if you will, or a metric that kind of flushes out, order of operations, order of importance. That's not to say of those things that are identified in this plan. A lot of times what you're going to see with any of these potential things that are shown in this report, it's going to come down to what happens adjacent. Is there a need at some point to rebuild South River Road? I know, of course, we just did the slurry seal, so maybe prior the installation of additional public facilities there, where we were, whether it was funded through general fund revenues or gas tax dollars or however it's funded or grant dollars, it would be kind of co-located with a larger project. That being said, now that it's in the plan and Public Works Director, Mr. Stewart can speak to this in regard to that trail system along the east bank of the Coast Fork. Once it's in this plan, it shows community acceptance. And so it makes that ask when filling out the grant application that much easier. It almost provides that bulletproof path for the grant reviewer to say, the community had an extended period of time to comment on this, both through public open hearings here this evening in the Planning Commission, to identify these as being items of public interest. And then, of course, with the council adopting them, it shows that it has community support. When filling out these grant applications, much like the one that we filled out just to get this grant to fund this project, it was all because of a previous plan that identified, and I believe I spoke to this specifically on Friday, the 2015 Transportation System Plan identified that we knew we needed to put more effort into our pedestrian bicycle transportation system. And so when the council in 2015 adopted that, they set us up for that success. And then we had some other successes with the Safe Routes to Schools project of showing community support for investment and installation. And so that's what made us a good candidate for this grant. And so by having that in here, it now makes the project that you referenced, filling that gap on South River Road, that much more, you know, of a point earner on that grant review panel. And so I would just say that it's pretty well established, but as with all things, excuse me, in any of these adopted plans, whether they're just, you know, your water capital improvement plans or whatever, they can be prioritized based on the need of the community, the resources available, and the will of the council to make that direction.
Any questions? Counselor Lammerman.
So once this is voted on and we put it in, does that make everything in it concrete? Or at some point, can something be removed? I know it's harder to add to, but can something be removed?
Mayor, Councilor Lammerman. So yes, so the Cottage Grove Comprehensive Plan, it really truly is a living document in much the same way that we are here tonight to potentially add add to the transportation element. Certainly by way of a change in philosophy, for lack of a better word, you could make amendments. Now, with one caveat that it can't be amended such that it becomes non-compliant with state law and regulation. So I would save that one exception. But if it were something where I made the example with Councilor Irvin earlier, council says we don't want cars anymore. That is something that you could do to amend this document, which becomes that guiding document for how we invest in our community and how our community grows.
Thank you.
Ordinance number?
Ordinance number 3189.
Counselor Irvin.
So to Councilor Mirday's point, was that section, because I would be in support of, I am in support of your proposal. I think that would be a benefit to the community and kind of trails up in the Eugene Trail system that draw people in and tie it to the history. What would be the advice for, and would that require an amendment? Would that say actually make that section high priority, or is it just direction to staff?
Mayor, Councilor Irvin, I believe that this is something, because it's identified as a gap, this is direction to staff. Amending a report to convert that one segment into a shorter term thing doesn't necessarily mean it ever happens, right? I mean, those are all just kind of adjectives in the moment to create a hierarchy, if you will, but it's really, the hierarchy is established by the council. The council directs the investment in the community. And so because it's identified, it's not something, you know, if it weren't identified, it would be more problematic, but it is identified, and therefore council directing staff to prioritize grant seeking in that effort is fully written into this.
Thank you. I would move that the council adopt hold it first vote on ordinance 3189, amending the Cottage Grove Comprehensive Plan to add the Cottage Grove pedestrian and bicycle plan to the transportation element.
I'll second.
We have a motion with a second.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I kind of got to talking and I left out the good parts. Staff, of course, does recommend approval. This ordinance has been available for more than 1 week and could be adopted in one meeting.
We have a motion with a second.
I'd like to amend my motion, and perhaps the second would like to amend his. Would move that the council adopt ordinance 3189, pedestrian and bicycle plan to the transportation element.
I will second your amendment.
All right. We have a motion with a second. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Lammerman,
Aye.
Counselor Meredith,
Aye.
Counselor Irvin,
Aye.
Mayor Solsby.
Aye. Unanimous. All right. Ordinance amending the City of Cottage Grove Municipal Code Title 14 Land Use, the citywide zoning map for Double H Investments LLC, portion of map tax lot 20-03-31-00-02200, lot 4, Double H Estates. And I thought you said you were going to make that number shorter for me.
Madam Mayor, I promised on the next one. I would
Okay.
make it shorter. Thank you again. At the city council meeting held on August 26, 2024, council adopted ordinance number 3188, annexing approximately 0.41 acres into the city of Cottage Grove as a requirement of annexation per section 18.04.090 of the Cottage Grove Municipal Code, the property owner is required to apply for a zone change of the subject property to redesignate the zoning from county zoning to city zoning. Per subsection 14.47.400.1, the Planning Commission shall review and decide upon land use district map changes that do not involve comprehensive plan map amendments through a type 3 application procedure. The Planning Commission held a public hearing for zone change application 2.24 on September 18th, 2024, voting 6-0 in favor of applying the R1 zone to the subject property. And I would add that as described above, the comprehensive plan land use map designation for the property was L low density residential, and R1 is an implementing zone of that designation. As the Planning Commission does not have the ability to adopt an ordinance, council is now being asked to ratify the Planning Commission's decision to approve ZC 2-24 by adopting the prepared draft ordinance. This ordinance has been available for more than 1 week prior to this meeting, and staff is recommending
Sequential order. Okay. Move that the council adopt ordinance 3190, amending the Cottage Grove Municipal Code Title 14 Land Use, the citywide zoning map for Double H Investments LLC, ZC 2 map tax lot 20-03-31-00-02200 lot 4 Double H Estates.
We have a second?
I second. I think you forgot a couple numbers.
Do we have any discussion? Yeah. All right. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Meredith,
Aye.
Counselor Irvin,
Aye.
Counselor Lammerman,
Aye.
Mayor Soulsby.
Aye. Motion passes unanimous. Cancellation of November 11th, 2024 and December 23rd, 2024 City Council meetings. City Manager, Mr. Sauerwein.
I apologize. I should have carried this. That's my Saturday screening. It's not a little, we have an upcoming city council.
Mr. Is your mic on? Is your mic on? Doesn't sound like it's on.
Pardon me. As we have spoken before, our city charter requires that the city council meet at least once a month. And we do have an upcoming city council meeting scheduled for November 11th, which is Veterans Day, and City Hall will be closed. We also have an upcoming city council meeting on December 23rd, which of course is a couple days before Christmas. And so city staff is recommending that we cancel those two meetings. And again, with the understanding that we will still meet at least once in November and once in December.
You just need a consensus? Okay. You have it. All right. Anyone have anything? No? Counselor Urban.
Well, last week I had a conversation with someone local here involved in the fire department that was asking me, you know, what's the designation between why do we have to have Pacific Power in some areas and not others? EPUD serving other areas, you know, why can't there be choice? EPUD seemed to have responded better in our recent emergencies. So just posing that question. So that sent me down a rabbit trail this week, and I'm still digging. But I guess I would report with our franchise agreement. So I reviewed all those and then started looking up how all that works. And as it turns out, this is a decision, the boundaries of which, I think it's specific to power, are set as through a decision made by the Public Utilities Commission, which is I think it's a board of 3 that's appointed by the governor that effectively operates under Oregon Revised Statutes 528.400 to 475, I think. So it still is an important question to ask, I think, you know, how do we ensure the best service to the ratepayer in Cottage Grove, best service, lowest price, and, you know, how does that come down? And so I know our franchise agreement, they renew every once in a while. I think they renew on a 10-year cycle, depending on which one. And I know that one in particular renews in September of 25. There's a clause that you have to have reached a decision 128 days prior to renewal. So by May of next year, we'll want to have as much information, I think, as we can to be as informed as possible to negotiate the best arrangement for the residents. So I guess more to come later as I learn more.
Anyone else? Counselor Lammerman.
I'd like to see, Faye, if there's something we can do, the unhoused, spoke about the rain coming up. Is there anything we can do to, put some sort of cover over the Dusk Till Dawn site? Because it might go to help a little bit with maybe some of the morale of the people using that, to be able to have somewhere dry they can sleep at night, maybe.
Counselor Merriday.
Yes, I just want to welcome Counselor Lammerman and thank you for being willing to serve and step up and appreciate your input tonight. Thank you.
And also, I think this is our last meeting before Halloween. And want to remind everyone, well, we have one more, don't we? Oh, we do. So I'm going to remind you tonight, and I'm going to remind you again about downtown's Halloween. Something positive. Concerns of council. So anybody else have anything else before I close? Okay. Report from the city manager.
Well, good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. I just have one quick item to follow up on, and it involves our homeless camp. It's currently now at 12th Street. As you all know, we started out with two very simple and concise goals. We wanted to be able to clean up the Douglas site, and we wanted to be able to clean up the 12th Street site. And then we also, as our second goal, was to stand up a 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Camp. And we did that initially at the Lulu site, where we were in the process of cleaning up 12th Street. We now have completed our work at 12th Street, and we are transitioning from the Lulu site over to the 12th Street site this last week. And we will be cleaning up Lulu's and turning it back into a dog park, which was its original intent. And so we'll be using the site at 12th Street. As we discussed earlier, we decided that we would spend about 90 days working with the folks from One Security, and then we would be able looking at possibly transitioning from that. And so city staff is starting that discussion. We'll provide you with more information as we go forward. And again, I apologize for the fact that my voice keeps cracking.
Thank you. Report from the city attorney.
We're coming up on 9, and so all I'd like to say for this evening is just welcome Counselor Lammerman. Thank you again. You heard it from everybody. Save everything else for October 22nd.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks.
Yes. Well, you made it through your first meeting. So with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn.